This is the BS4 podcast, and I'm your host, Bria Villa. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the BS4 podcast. I'm your host, Bria Villa, and today's episode was highly requested. I am cozy and comfy on my couch right now. I actually just worked a full day and wanted to make sure that I got an episode filmed at the end of my workday. So it went from the 9 to 5 to the 5 to 9. But this episode was actually highly requested. So I did a poll on my Instagram about a week ago, and I asked everyone this or that and asked which topics you all want to hear about. And this one was the most voted for. So today's topic is forgiveness. And I know that it is not easy. Forgiveness is a really difficult thing. And so I want to talk through this vulnerably. I want to be really candid about what I've learned about forgiveness and honestly how I've shifted my frame of mind on forgiveness, because there was years of my life that I held resentment and anger and frustration towards someone, to certain people. And really the only person who had to live with that was me. And it wasn't until more recently, which I know I say this a lot, but a lot of my evolution, a lot of my growth, a lot of my ahas have come within the last few years of my life. So I would say that, this is no different than the rest of the big realizations I've had, but forgiveness is tough. I actually recently listened to a podcast where Dr. Frederick Luskin, he is a psychiatrist, a professor, I believe, at Stanford, and he's studied forgiveness over the last 20 years. He's done so many talks about forgiveness, written dissertations about forgiveness, went through his own really tough forgiveness journey and decided to study it and do research on it and ultimately teach people about the power and the art of forgiveness. And so I learned a lot from him. So some of the things that I say today are going to be essentially nuggets that I've learned from him, but in my own terms and in the ways that I understood it. So I always like to point to where I get some of this knowledge, because while some of it is through lived experience and some of it is from my own expertise or my perspective or my opinion, it's also from other really powerful thought leaders who have done the research that, I haven't done, who literally work at Stanford. So, their knowledge carries weight, their research carries weight. So look him up. I love the way that he talks about forgiveness. I love how open and honest he is about it. But a lot of this is also my own understanding and interpretation of it. And I'll share a few of my own stories. But if you are looking to forgive right now, if you are looking to take steps towards forgiveness, if there are situations that you have been in that are really tough, in which have caused you to hold resentment or hold anger or feel betrayal or feel frustration towards someone, this episode's for you. I think that, and I hope that there's a lot that you can take away from this episode, because I have a lot to say about it. And so I always like to start by saying, and level setting, that you don't see things as they are, you see things as you are. And I know that's kind of tough to conceptualize, but the world, and I believe this firmly, the world is your mirror. So the way you see the world is through the lens and perspective that you've gained through, of course, life experience. But if I'm always seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, then my perspective is going to be different than someone who doesn't, right? And so the way that you see the world is how you are, not how the world is, if that makes sense. And so when you look at something like forgiveness, you also have to realize that the way that you are seeing this situation, this person, is through your lens, not the objective lens, not through their lens. And so if there are things or themes that are consistently showing up in your life, it should cause you to kind of reflect and say, okay, what is it about me that is reaping these situations? Because I'm seeing the world as I am. I'm not just seeing the world as it is. And so I know that's like a really deep concept to think about, but it's the truth. And there's a lot of nuances in forgiveness because there's a difference in transgressions. There's a difference between forgiving someone for forgetting your birthday, which, by the way, that low-key hurts my feelings. Like, you are validated if someone forgets your birthday and you feel a type of way about it. Like, that low-key hurts my feelings, right? But there's a big difference between forgiving someone for forgetting your birthday and forgiving someone who physically abused you in your childhood, right? So there is a natural aspect of life in which we call suffering. Everyone suffers. The level of suffering varies, but we all suffer, whether we suffer now, whether we suffer later. Dr. Frederick Luskin said, and it really stuck with me, he was like, at some point towards the end, we all lose the same things. We all lose our parents, we lose friends, we lose jobs, we lose communities, we lose houses, we all lose. Towards the end of our life, we all lose the same things. We all experience suffering. Now, some people experience suffering more front-loaded. This is what he said. Some people experience more suffering front-loaded in their life, whereas others experience suffering back-loaded in their life. And some people experience suffering loaded everywhere. Front, back, in between, they experience a lot of suffering. And so to understand that every single human being suffers, it is a part of life, is to also build a certain level of compassion that you should have for other people because you know that they are suffering in the same ways that you are. Just maybe there's a difference in timing, situation, depth. Their transgressions may feel heavier than others, but everyone suffers. And so when you're looking at something like forgiveness, you have to have a level of awareness to realize that everybody's human and that people will do things out of survival. People will do things out of lack of knowledge. People will do things with such naivety because they literally don't know what they don't know. But those things can hurt you and they can cause a lot of pain. But there's a difference between, like I said, the depth in which you need to forgive. Some people do things without knowing. Some people do things very intentionally and it causes a lot of pain. And so forgiving those things is going to be more difficult. So I want to be really clear before going into this conversation that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to forgiveness. There's tips that you can use to be able to forgive and move on. But the amount of time it takes to implement those tips and actually have them work is going to be varied depending on the situation in which you're forgiving. So I just want to be clear that some of the things that I'm saying will feel a lot harder in some situations than others, but hopefully they're rules of thumb that you can use to be able to forgive regardless of the amount of time or what the transgression is. And so I think most importantly, I want to start with saying that forgiveness is an inner journey. Forgiveness comes from inside of you. Forgiveness is not something that is warranted by external action, meaning forgiveness has to come from a level of healing in which you've done yourself and choose to forgive, regardless of whether or not this person has asked for your forgiveness, whether or not this situation has requested for you to forgive it, them, whatever it may be, whether or not this person is sorry, right? Like none of that will warrant whether or not it's forgiven. It is an inner journey. It is something for you to decide. It is something for you to own and for you to live with. And so I want to get into like how forgiveness, because the opposite of forgiveness is pain, is frustration, is anger, is resentment, is holding a grudge. That's what the opposite of forgiveness is. And in the same breath that forgiveness can only be done through inner work, all those things that you experience, the anger, the frustration, the resentment, the only person who lives with those things is you. So forgiveness is important because the only person carrying the weight of this situation is you. Now, the impact of unforgiveness. Unforgiveness feels like, and let's kind of go through an example. You and a family member don't get along. You don't see eye to eye. There's things that have happened between the two of you over the course of time, and ultimately you have a falling out, right? I want you to think about what that feels like. We've all been there. Like, we've had a falling out with someone. So I just want you to think about that falling out, right? The first thing that comes to mind when I think about that person or when I think about that situation is the hurt that they caused me. So the pain that I felt. And then when I think about that pain, and I want you to think about that pain, how does that pain make you feel? It makes you feel angry. It makes you feel frustrated. It makes you feel vengeful. It makes you feel resentment. All of those things sit in your body and ultimately impact your nervous system. So when you are going through some of these emotions, you're setting your nervous system up to be essentially in fight or flight. You're setting your nervous system up to be in a state of stress. You're increasing your cortisol levels, which ultimately will have an impact on the rest of your body. So people who carry a certain level of resentment or pain or anger, you just know that they're naturally angry people, or they carry a lot of, like I said, pain or resentment over time from situations, from things that have happened to them. There are studies that show that that will naturally have an impact on your overall health and well-being. Your cortisol spikes, inflammation starts in the body because your body is in a sense of survival and preservation because it feels like it's under attack. Because you've told your body through your anger, through your frustration, through your resentment, that you are in defense mode. And when your body lives in defense mode for a substantial amount of time, your organs will start to compensate for that defense mode because your brain is giving them signals saying, you're in defense. And then all of a sudden, everything in your anatomy starts to come to your defense. But what ends up happening is, like I said, inflammation. And inflammation can lead to muscular issues. It can lead to organ failure. It can lead to cognitive issues. And so carrying that level of stress and carrying that load, studies will show this, can physically harm you down the road. So it's not just like the mental day-to-day that you're living in, but if all of a sudden you're carrying the anger from a relationship for 5, 6, 7 years, your body will start to take the toll on how that anger sits with it. And not only, like I said, is this impacting your minds, but it's impacting your overall health. Okay, so that's like an extreme of, or not even an extreme, that's a reality of what harboring resentment can look and feel like from a health perspective. But on top of that, this unresolved anger can become habitual. And so now not only are you angry with the person in the situation that's happened or the persons in situations that have unfolded, but now you're just angry towards life. Like, how many people do you know who have been through a lot in life just become tainted by it? Which I understand to an extent. Some people, like I said, go through immeasurable amounts of suffering. And so I can't just knock someone for losing hope or approaching life in a certain way because of the things that they've been through. But the opposite of that is freeing yourself from an imprisonment that you've created in your mind. And so my own personal journey is I have a really good relationship with my dad now. We rekindled a few months ago. And prior to our rekindling, I had cut him out of my life and we didn't talk for nearly 6 years. It was like 5 years and some change. And the entirety of that time, varying in degrees, I held a level of resentment towards him. I held a level of anger. I would have certain memories that would trigger frustration in me. And then I'm angry and then I'm sweating and then my heart's palpitating and then I have a pit in my stomach. And I'm like feeling the physical effects from being angry with him and not forgiving him. And I harbored so much resentment towards him. And the wild thing is, now that we've rekindled our relationship and I've forgiven, I realized that there's so much more to his story than what I initially thought. And I think a lot of it was because of a protection of myself, or what I thought I was doing was protecting myself. But the reality is the wounds that I felt from the loss of the relationship were partially self-inflicted, mainly self-inflicted, because I'm the one who cut him out of my life. I'm the one who held the resentment towards him, and I'm the one who didn't want to resolve it. And so who's the person who's sitting with all that? Although, yes, of course, like he's in pain as well because he doesn't have a relationship with his daughter. At the end of the day, the person that I'm seeing carry the load the most is me. Like, I'm the person who's sitting there feeling all these things, unable to let go, and holding a grudge without even full knowledge around the decision that I made. And a lot of this is still new and private because it's my relationship with my dad, but there were two truths in the situation and both were true. There were two sides of the story and both sides had validity, but there was a side that I wasn't even willing to get to know because of the anger that I held, because of the resentment that I felt, because of the frustration that I had with him. And so nobody suffered more than me because I was putting myself through it because I didn't want to forgive. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is so hard. It's hard for me to trust people, blah, blah, blah. When the reality is like a lot of that was inflicted. And I'm not saying that the reasons that I had weren't valid reasons to feel the way that I felt. But what I'm saying is there's a certain level of processing your emotions and then harboring your emotions. And I think it took me a while to process them, but then I held on to the emotions that I felt and harbored them for years. But true processing is like, no, this is how I feel. And each day it's going to get a little bit better. And so, the progression of forgiveness should look like a month after a situation happens. You ask me how I'm doing and how I feel. And I'm like, I'm frustrated. The situation sucks. Now, 3 months, you run into me again and you say, hey, how's it going? How does that situation feel to you? How are you doing? I should be able to say, I'm learning to cope. I'm getting better. I'm working on it. The difference between the 1 month and the 3 months is that there's a progression there. For me, in this situation with my dad, it was the same response from the day that everything unfolded to the 5.5 year point. Well, the last year I was kind of going through this forgiveness process. So I'd say from day 1 to 4 years, I'm sitting there saying, this sucks. I'm so upset. I'm so frustrated. I'm upset with him, etc. And nobody suffers more from that than me. Literally no one. And to know my dad is to know that he's actually a very peaceful, loving, kind human being who the way that he showed up for me and my ideology of how he should have shown up for me were slightly different things, but with similar intentions. And I know that there's a big difference between intention and impact. Your intentions could be pure, but your impact can be poor. And even if your intentions are good, it doesn't change the fact that the impact was tough or that the impact wasn't good. But I do think it's important to understand people's intentions though. And so I was looking so much at the impact that I didn't realize the truth of the intention, which changed my perspective on a lot of it. But I didn't take a second to get to know and learn and be vulnerable and inquire and understand because I was too focused on the wounds that I had and not focused on maybe the wounds that he had that caused some of the actions to begin with. And so I went through this whole process not acknowledging my pain, just blaming for it. Instead of saying, this really hurts me. This situation is so hard for me. I miss my dad. Instead of saying things like that, I'm saying F him and what he got going on. I'm saying he don't care about me. I'm offloading and I'm not being vulnerable about my actual emotions and feelings. And that inflicts more wounds. And so I share all this to say, I literally love my father. We have such a good relationship. I just went to visit him. We spent a weekend together. We talked about everything under the sun, the most vulnerable, open, honest conversations I've ever had with a parent. He is truly a wealth of knowledge. And I feel like I misunderstood him for a really long time. And now I have so much better of an understanding. And he listens to all my podcasts. So he's going to listen to this. So hi, Dad. But I think that there was a lot of just misunderstanding. And now knowing him and knowing his heart and knowing the reasons behind a lot of his actions, I understood him and it allowed for more healing within me. But here's the thing. I understood him because he was vulnerable. I understood him because he shared truly where he was coming from and how he felt. I was never willing to do that. When I cut my dad out of my life, I didn't even tell him why. It just was something that transpired and I was like, I can't do this anymore, which was kind of immature of me, to be honest. I was like, I can't do this anymore. That's it. I'm done. Block on everything. He tried reaching out so many different times, but I just wasn't in a place to receive it. And so all that to say is my pain built a cage in my mind that I just lived in. And the only person that can get me out of that cage is myself. Not him, not anything that anybody else could have done or said. Me. It was my responsibility to heal and figure that out within myself. And a lot of that came from not being honest with myself, not being vulnerable enough with myself to say, no, this hurts. This makes me sad. I don't like this. A lot of it, again, had to do with just me trying to not own my own emotions towards something. And so I want to go back and say that there's two types of anger. There's anger that's protective, and there's anger that's facilitative. And Dr. Frederick Luskin taught me this. The anger that's protective is the one that I sat in for a really long time. The anger that's facilitative is the frustration that you may get. Let's say someone's bullying someone and you see it firsthand. The anger that you feel in that moment is facilitative because you're going to say, I'm stepping in, I'm not going to let this happen, etc., etc. So like there's a construct in which we've built in society. There's anger that's facilitative. So you're going to use it to be able to make a situation better. For example, a lot of the civil rights movements, etc., are fueled from an anger that should sit within us as humans to facilitate goodness, to facilitate something better. But then there's an anger that's protective. And the anger that's protective is because there's an avoidance of vulnerability. So you build this like emotional armor over time. And I think about decisions that I made out of avoiding that vulnerability, decisions or ways of thinking that I had because I didn't want to own the things that were hurting me. And moving out of fear in that way never leads to anything positive for you. It doesn't. Please think of and name a time in history that leading with grievance has ever worked. Like, when has it ever worked? When has war ever actually worked? And it's always done out of anger, frustration, resentment towards. And so my thing is like, anytime you move out of that place, the outcome is never going to be what you want it to be. Because you're moving from a place of lack. You're moving from a place of frustration. You're moving from a place of negativity instead of in a place of vulnerability and healing and love. And so the only person who really doesn't benefit from that is you. So I share this story and I'm vulnerable with you all because my dad has actually taught me a lot about forgiveness. He's taught me so much about forgiveness. And it's wild because he shared with me a time that he had to forgive his own father. And so he actually writes about it in his book. My dad wrote a book called This Old Dog Can Teach You New Tricks. So I will link it in my bio so that you all can go get a copy of it. It would mean a lot to me and it would mean a lot to him if you can go get it, but it has such good like wisdom. And sometimes I'm just like going through something and I'll open the book and be able to like find a chapter that perfectly fits. But he has a chapter in his book called The Power of Forgiveness. And there's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr., of course, that says, "Forgiveness is not an occasional act. It is a constant attitude." It's not just something that you're like, oh, I say I forgive you, but I'm going to harbor these feelings. It's like, no, you have to actively be vulnerable and be willing to forgive someone. And I want to be really clear. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. They are not equal sum. One can lead to the other, but it's not always the case that forgiveness has reconciliation following it or preceding it. Reconciliation is its own thing. Sometimes you have to forgive someone that you won't reconcile with. Sometimes you have to forgive people or let go of situations that you won't ever get closure on. I don't even think closure exists, to be honest. The only person that can give you closure is yourself. But all that to say is just because you forgive someone doesn't mean that they have to be back in your life. Just because you have forgiven them for something they've done or a situation that's happened doesn't mean that you need to like be close to them. If it allows you to be, great, but like reconciliation isn't equal sum to forgiveness. So I want to be really clear on that. But in his book, he talks about different steps to practice forgiveness, some of which I'm going to read to you because I think that they're really good. I also have written my own down, so we're going to kind of compare. And then he actually shares an entire story about him and his dad and how he had to learn to forgive his dad because his dad came from a very stern upbringing and raised my dad very strict. And my dad lived in a lot of fear of his dad. And he realized that his dad did a lot of the things that he did out of love and out of a lack of knowing any better. He did what he had with the tools that he had. And so my dad was able to ultimately forgive him. Even though he lived a lot of his childhood in fear, he was able to understand where his own father was coming from. And so it's so interesting, like reading that story and then having gone through the situation with my own dad, because I know that he is truly a forgiving person. And so it's great to be able to forgive in the ways that he has. But like he's gone through a lot of the things that I've gone through. And inevitably, like, I guess the pattern kind of repeated, but not in the ways like I didn't ever live in fear with my dad. But anyways, so some steps to practice forgiveness. So I wrote down own the pain. Acknowledge the pain without minimizing it. If you are feeling pain, you have to be able to look in the mirror and be like, this hurts. Like, this is why this is hurting me. This is how I am truly feeling, and acknowledge it. If you try to act like it's not there, if you try to act like this person didn't hurt you, if you try to act like this situation doesn't impact you, then you're never going to be able to move on from it. The truth is the truth. It does hurt you. It does bother you. It does keep you up at night. Own that. I think for a long time, I didn't want people to feel like they had such an impact on me. But why? They did. The truth is they did. Even if I hate that that's the case, even if I'm embarrassed to admit it, the truth is the truth. Like, if you had a profound impact on me and I was really hurt by what you did, yeah, it might be embarrassing, but like, you hurt me and I felt hurt about it. And sure, you had power over me in that moment. And yeah, it sucked. But you have to own it. You have to own it. I think so much of me not being able to forgive or move on in a lot of situations is because I didn't even want to own the fact that someone hurt me. I didn't want to be vulnerable enough to own it. So I think it's owning the pain. And literally, I wrote, own the pain. My dad writes, acknowledge the hurt. Same thing. Acknowledge the fact that something hurt you. Acknowledge it. Then he wrote, understand another person's perspective. I wrote, practice gratitude. So like, of course, we're human. Get to know why someone did what they did. And if it's not the type of person or situation that you can do that, then my thought process was, okay, but be grateful for what it taught you. You don't have to be grateful that it hurt you, but you can be grateful that you came out of it and it taught you something. So to me, you may not be able to look at every situation and understand where the person's coming from. Some people just do things that will be very difficult for you to understand and reconcile. But regardless of what they do, you can control how you look at it, and you can control, okay, this is showing me something within me that I need to heal. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn that. I'm grateful for the lessons that came out of it. So it's like, own the pain, show gratitude for the lessons, and then compassion. Be compassionate with yourself, be compassionate with others, and understand that everybody is a human having a human experience. We all have something. Like I said in the beginning, we all suffer. The extent of our suffering, the ways in which we suffer, the timing in which we suffer is going to be varied and nuanced, but we all do. And so I think of sometimes, like, I was scrolling on TikTok after all the fires that happened in LA, and which was like really devastating for me because I grew up in Southern California and it was really hard for me to watch places that I spent so much time in be burnt and see a city grieving that feels like home to me. And I'm going on TikTok and I'm seeing, people, of course, who make good money and make a good living, posting that they lost their homes and all these things. And I'm seeing people in the comments talking about, you're rich, you'll be fine. And like, to me, that is the most incompassionate thing to say, because regardless of how they will recover from this or not, regardless if they have enough money to recover from this or not, there are certain things that you will never be able to get back in a situation like that. There are certain memories that you have in places that you won't be able to look back on. Like, people spent their entire lives in certain homes. To me, I look at things like that and I'm like, it tells you so much more about the person who's saying it than it does about the situation. And I equally pray for the people who have that mindset, because clearly somewhere in your journey, you associate rich people with something that's negative or something that's evil. And granted, like, there's nuances everywhere, but I'm just saying, being able to look at another human being and see a level of suffering that they're experiencing and not have compassion shows you that there's a lot that you have to heal within yourself. Okay. So like, compassion is so important. And Dalai Lama says this, and this is something that I firmly believe in. My religion is kindness. Like, no matter how you cut or slice it, no matter what you believe, where you come from, who you are, what your background is, humans at a basic level deserve kindness and compassion. And so through the journey of forgiveness, although there may be things that feel unforgivable, I believe that there's universal right and wrongs, but I don't believe that there are things that are unforgivable. And that may be a hot take, but things that you do not forgive, you carry. You are putting yourself in a mental prison, and the only person who holds the keys is you. So finding a level of compassion is going to allow you to let go of the pain that you were feeling from that situation. So acknowledge the pain, practice gratitude, have compassion, and shift from this like victim mindset to survivor. Instead of, this is what happened to me and I will always be a victim of da 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 da. It's like, no. I survived this. Small or big scale, you survived something that hurt you. And it should be viewed that way. And I think a lot of people get so caught up in like making the pain that they've been through a part of their identity and not just a part of their story. And I think that there's a difference. And so it's a part of your story and it's how you use it to keep going. It's not who you are. You are not your pain. You are not the things that you went through, but they are a part of your story. Forgiveness is an inner healing. When we choose not to forgive, it's because oftentimes we haven't been able to look ourselves in the mirror and own the pain that we've been through. And then if you've owned the pain, it's not being able to say, okay, but I'm a survivor of this. I'm not a victim of this anymore. Another big piece that my dad said was practice self-forgiveness. Don't forget to forgive yourself for any role that you may have played in the situation. Self-forgiveness is just as important as forgiving others, and it's essential for your emotional well-being. Forgiveness, at the end of the day, is freedom. Forgiveness is freedom. What you choose to hold on to, what you choose to harbor is your choice. If you continue to live in a cycle where you don't own what's happened to you, where you hold it against the people who have done it to you, and you're constantly angry and you're constantly upset, or you're constantly just like in this state of having emotional armor up, the only person who suffers the most is you. The only person who suffers deeply is you. And that's a realization that I had to have about myself, is that all the pain that I was feeling was pain that ultimately I was creating for myself because I was harboring it. I didn't own the fact that I was feeling it. I didn't acknowledge it. I wasn't vulnerable about it. I was avoidant. I was very avoidant. And it ended up hurting me in a relationship that I had for 5 years when I didn't have to. I'd like to think that if I sat down and owned the pain that I had in that moment and addressed how it truly hurt me, I wouldn't have carried it for nearly 6 years of my life. And that was a lesson that I had to learn. Like, I'm grateful for that lesson. And it helps me navigate things that I'm even going through right now. Like, there's just certain things that I'm learning to forgive without even having conversations with people about it, without even needing to address it in ways that I may have before, because I'm owning the pain and I'm having compassion and I'm trying to just forgive. And so all that to say is forgiveness is not easy, but it's a gift that you can give yourself. And releasing things is a reclaiming of your power. Being vulnerable is strength, and it will allow for you to move on. And I understand, like, there are, again, really tough situations where vulnerability with certain people is not good for your safety. So, like, I have to be explicitly clear that there is not a one size fits all. But when I say to be vulnerable, if you can't be vulnerable with the person about the situation that happened, at least be vulnerable with yourself. And if you can't figure it out with that person in that situation, it is okay to ask for help and say, I don't know how to forgive. I need to see a therapist. I need to have a trusted circle of friends that I can lean on. And it is okay to do that. But you have to be vulnerable enough to be like, okay, I do need the help. I do need to figure this out. So forgiveness is a beautiful gift that you can give to yourself. And I want you to reflect on what that really means. Because someone can come to you and say, I'm sorry. And if you're still not over it, or you're still haven't acknowledged the pain that it's caused you, then it doesn't mean it's just forgiven because they've said sorry and you said, I forgive you, but you still harbor the resentment. True forgiveness only comes from within. It is only something that you can do. It is only something that you can provide. It is only something that you can grant, and it'll allow you to heal. So think about situations that you're in right now. I encourage you to reflect on what forgiveness means and take one small step towards it today. Whether that first step just be acknowledging the pain that it made you feel, whether you've acknowledged that pain and you want to be able to find compassion, whether you've acknowledged that pain, you have compassion, and you can sit there and think about how grateful you are for the lessons it's given you. Take a small step, but that small step is freeing you. It's not freeing anyone else. That small step is for you and for you only. And if others benefit from your forgiveness, even more beautiful. I am all about love. I am all about peace. So if that is the case, so be it. But at the end of the day, it is only you that can grant it for yourself. So I really hope that you took something away from this. I think forgiveness is a beautiful thing. And it's not easy, but it's worth doing. And I feel so much lighter now because I've forgiven. So today, the B is for bloom, symbolizing growth, letting go, and blooming. You are evolving. Forgiveness will allow you to evolve. It'll allow you to grow. So I'm sending you all my love. I hope that you really took something away from today. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate, do all the things. It'll help me so much. And I will appreciate you forever if you do it. And also go grab a copy of my dad's book because it's really good. I'm like, this man got so much wisdom in here and I highly recommend it. So I will put the link in my bio below, but thank you so much for listening. I appreciate y'all as always. I'm so glad that you requested this topic because it was a good one for me to cover and it honestly felt freeing to talk about it. So please let me know if there's anything else that you all want to hear about. I appreciate all of you so much. And I will see you next week. Adios.